Blessings, beloveds. Welcome back to my channel, Anastasia, Cosmic Astrologer, sharing some astrological insights again today. So today I want to spend a little bit of time talking about Amy Winehouse. I said I would do this video, so here I am about to do it for you guys. First of all, I guess I would really like to start what inspired me to do this video. Well, quite apart from the fact that I love her music, I watched a documentary just recently, which was a couple of hours long, and I found it very, very moving. It was very sad, to be quite honest, and just also quite incredible just to see her journey, really. It is live footage of her throughout the entire documentary, so we can see from that pretty much what's been presented is mostly truth. So as a result of watching that documentary, I was compelled to dig up her chart and have a look at the astrology. And I've said this many times to you guys as well, you know, one of the most effective ways to understand astrology is to always look at charts, you know, to always correlate the story of a person or an event back to the chart. So you start drawing these correlations and making these connections, and you start understanding the astrological symbolism on the number of different levels that it can basically play out, because when it comes to the cosmic energies, nothing is one-dimensional or one stream. There's multiple layers and you know, multiple levels in how the energies can play out for each of us. So we're all dealing with the same cosmic forces, the same cosmic energies, but our own personal experience, which really derives from the driving force of the soul and what the soul is here to resolve or complete or transform or heal or develop, is very, very unique for every single one of us, which is one of the most spectacular things when you think about that, because we are working with 12 zodiac signs, and we are working with well, it depends. If you add the asteroids and you add Chiron, then you've got about 15, you know, planetary bodies, let's say. However, those planetary bodies and those 12 zodiacal signs are the same for all of us. They're no different. You know, I've got Mars in my chart, you've got Mars in your chart, etc., etc. However, again, the way these patterns manifest for all of us are very, very different based on the soul's motivation and drives and what the soul is here to experience, as I just said. So with Amy Winehouse, most of you, I assume, would be aware of who she is, but for some of you who are not, she was a female artist, a singer, predominantly a jazz singer. Well, that was her genre. That's the style of music that she loved, absolutely loved. It was something that she was so incredibly passionate about, and she really loved all the old school jazz musicians and people from that field or that genre of music. And this documentary really focuses on how she started out and essentially what happened in her life pretty much right until her last breath. And she died very, very young. She was only 27 when she died. So it was just, you know, before her Saturn return, but it would have been during her secondary progress lunation cycle kicked in. So we all go through a secondary progress lunation cycle, which completes at around about 27 and a half. Now, the way to understand that is, in the heavens, when you look at the moon, just the cycle of the moon from new moon, as it travels around, gets to full moon and then starts to wane again and gets back to becoming a new moon again. Well, that one entire cycle that the moon does, which has 8 phases through it, takes about 28 days, thereabouts. So the secondary progressed moon follows that path, but what we are working with is secondary progressions, which is a very specific technique to astrology. And the secondary progressed lunation cycle that we each have at about 27 and a half, 28, around there, is a very significant cycle that indicates tremendous completion, development. A lot of it has got to do with the emotional structures, really, because it's the moon. It also has to do with the home life, the family, and it also has to do with past matters, because the moon always connects us to our past in the present life and past in previous lives as well. Nevertheless, when we complete that secondary progressed lunation cycle, it's a pivotal point in our life in terms of direction, changes, transformations, leaving things behind, etc., etc. So when Amy Winehouse passed away, she was right at that point. Now, I will bring up the chart when she passed away, because even through transits, there was just an incredibly powerful transit, which can be an indication of an ending, a death. It can be a literal death, in her case it was, and it can just be the deaths in terms of the psychological and emotional deaths that we go through as we continue to evolve and pretty much experience our life. I'll get to that later, but what I would like to first do is just put up her chart and just discuss a couple of very prominent signatures in her chart, which really do describe her life story. But before I do that, I just would like to make a few more comments about her life story. So she started singing quite young and really started to sort of excel fairly quickly in her field. She became known pretty quickly, just simply because she had so much talent. Now, I've said this in another video, the first 6 signs of the zodiac are often seen in people's charts who have exceptional creative ability and talent. And the reason for that is because those early signs are very self-focused. That might be hard to understand, but this is the way to understand it. When those energies are pretty much about the self, it's like a conjunction aspect as well. Those energies pretty much promote an enormous amount of energy within the individual to create. And those early signs are very similar, because those early signs, they're not about social, collective issues, other people, relationships and things like that. They're very much about developing the identity of who the person is, and that includes their creative juice and creative form and creative talents. So it is very typical to see those early signs in people who are exceptional musicians, actors, and so forth. And just to name a few, Amy Winehouse is one of them. Michael Jackson, who was a Virgo. Prince, who was a Gemini. Madonna, who's a Leo. There's many, many others, but they're just the ones that just came off the top of my head right now. So Amy Winehouse was a Virgo, actually. So there she is there, fitting in that zone that I'm talking about, where there's this just tremendous potential for creative power, creative expression, artistry, craft. Now, she had a very severe drug and alcohol problem that she pretty much developed fairly early on in life. And it got really, really bad when she hooked up with a guy who she was totally in love with. He was a severe drug addict, from what's been represented at least. And the influence of him and her together was unfortunately very toxic and disastrous, because it literally led to her death. Uh, she was, she worshipped her father, and those words are not my own words. This was verbalized in the documentary, and you could actually see it anyway. You could see the connection between her and her father, and what it was that she idealized him to be something that he wasn't. So she had Sun in Virgo. Now the Sun always says something about our own father. The Sun is our own identity, consciousness, self-expression, but it also describes qualities about our own actual father, or the father figure that we had in our life. So he was, he really, you could see that Virgo energy in him, although he's probably not a Virgo, but that Sun really described her father, and he was quite hard with her. She idealized him so much that all she wanted to do was please him and get his validation and love and attention and affection. And he barely gave that to her, because most of the time the way he's depicted is that he's always just pushing her and pushing her and pushing her to perform, to sing, to do concerts, to make records and things like that. He was acting like her manager, and it's like he was this person who wasn't her father at all, and all he cared about was her just becoming this massive success, world success, because I think she was pretty much kind of supporting them financially as well. Now, she had a Sun square Neptune in her chart, and that really describes the relationship she had with her father in a lot of different ways, especially the component where she idealized him. That's often a theme, a feature that we see when somebody has Sun square Neptune. The father is usually absent in some kind of way, whether it's physically, emotionally, mentally, or spiritually, or all. In terms of her own self, see, Virgo is such a sensitive sign. You normally wouldn't think that Virgo is sensitive, but it actually is. From the point of view of Virgo can be very shy, it's very self-conscious, can be very insecure and have a lot of self-doubt, because the sign is about perfection. So the Virgo individual is constantly pushing themselves to improve. There's this massive self-improvement theme that goes on in the Virgo's life, and it doesn't matter how good they are at something, they still kind of feel that it's not good enough. So they're always pushing themselves more and more and more. I've seen that in a lot of Virgo people, even in my own personal life, certainly in a lot of people's charts that I've looked at, and a lot of famous people's charts as well. So she had that element within her. She had tremendous insecurity. She was incredibly shy. Now, Sun Neptune, remember, the Sun is the ego, right? It's our personality trying to shine and express the conscious solar force that needs to be expressed out there. When Neptune is affecting the Sun, Neptune compromises the defenses of the ego. It undermines the confidence of the ego. So while Sun Neptune can be great for the spiritual fields, or for artistic fields, or for sensitivity, empathy, compassion, things like that, when it comes to the strength of the ego, Neptune weakens the ego. In addition to that, it pretty much eliminates any boundaries. So Sun Neptune people often struggle to have boundaries as well. Now, all these elements can be very easily understood in the context of her drug and alcohol problem. She was going to the studio, whenever she went to the studio, she'd be sitting there with a glass of Coke and whiskey, I think it was, she was drinking. So she'd be, making music in the studio, and she would just be drinking one drink after another. She was pretty much smashed every day. And I don't even know how she managed to create what she did, but she did. And actually, I do know. It's she's got a Saturn-Pluto conjunction in her birth chart. That conjunction only occurs every 33 years. That's why, just as a side note, at the moment, we've got transiting Saturn and transiting Pluto in the sign of Capricorn, and in a couple of years' time, they're going to catch up together, because Saturn is going to catch up with Pluto, and that conjunction is going to be huge for the world collectively. It only happens every 33 years. Anyway, she was born with that conjunction. That says a lot about her ability to really persevere and push through things as well. She also had a Moon Neptune conjunction, which describes the relationship with her mother. And her mother was, you could almost say that she was emotionally absent or mentally absent as well from Amy's life. Like, her parents were there in her life, but there was this disconnection or discord between them. You could see it. And Amy even said at one stage, she said, "Oh, my mum was so soft with me when I was little. She didn't really teach me any, she didn't sort of implement any boundaries and sort of didn't teach me to toughen up." In other words, she was saying that her mum was really soft and somewhat distant and disconnected. Now that can be reflected through a Moon Neptune aspect. So the mother is somewhat weakened as well, or the feminine function, and the moon is the mother. So Neptune plays a very big role in Amy Winehouse's chart because it's squaring her sun and conjunct her moon, which certainly does describe a lot of her creative talent, but there are other things in her chart that describe that probably even more. I might just actually bring up her chart. So just bear with me. Okay, so this is Amy Winehouse's chart, as you can see. She was born on the 14th of September 1983 at 10:25 p.m. This is not a rectified time, but I've had a look at a few things, and it's if it was to be rectified, it wouldn't be very far away from this time. So this time of birth that's given is pretty close to the actual time, which is good because it indicates that pretty much where everything is located is the correct place. Now, here's her sun in Virgo in the 4th house, conjunct Mercury in Virgo. And here is Neptune in her 7th house, conjunct her moon. Now, it's an out-of-sign conjunction, but it's still incredibly powerful. It's only 4 degrees away. So that moon Neptune, that's the relationship she had with her mother. There was a sense of disappointment. Now, Neptune is the planet that brings up the experience of disappointment, because Neptune is the planet that creates disillusionment. And if we feel disillusioned because, we had these ideals or perception on something, and then at some particular point we realize that those ideals or that perception we had is actually not the truth of what is actually happening, then there's incredible sense of disappointment. That's why Neptune connects to disappointment, essentially. So here she has the moon conjunct Neptune and Neptune square the sun. So there was a lot of confusion for Amy about her own identity, really. She was trying so hard to be perfect in her father's eyes, and no matter what she did, she couldn't do it. Her escapism was the substance abuses through drugs and alcohol, and that was the only way she could relax and pretty much escape her suffering. She was very self-conscious. She had a lot of self-doubt and very critical, very hard on herself. Very, 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 very shy. You can actually see this if you find your hands on the documentary. You can literally see just how shy she really was. When she performed, which is the case with most performers, the thing that enables performers to express their creative juice is that they get in a particular zone, and the zone is called being in the present moment. That's why there's nothing more powerful than being in the present moment, because when all the energy and attention is focused in the right here, right now, which is what Eckhart Tolle's work is all about, the present, and just how powerful that is, then there's this experience of removing or disconnecting from everything else. So imagine the amount of energy that can go into that one space in the one time, because you're not focused on anything else but that moment. It's called being in the zone. And that's what most artists do. They also tune into other elements of themselves, very deep soul, heart feelings, experiences to draw from, to bring their passion forth, to bring their depth forth when they are singing about something. Now, all of Amy Winehouse's music is pretty much based on her relationship with this guy and just everything she went through. Also, she's got that famous song, Rehab, and that was literally based on her life, in the sense where everyone around her was, let's just say, encouraging her to go to rehab, and she really didn't want to go. She did actually go, though, at one point, but unfortunately it wasn't enough to really help her with what she really needed. She was a soul that was suffering, is what I'm trying to say. She was very lost, a very lost soul. That's very Sun Neptune, Moon Neptune. Tremendous creative force and power. Now look at that Venus-Mars conjunction in Leo. That's a very, very, very powerful conjunction in a fire sign in Leo. Leo is the sign of creative expression. And she has both Venus and Mars there. So most of her creative power and force comes through that conjunction. The Pluto-Saturn conjunction really does describe a person who has to work through very, 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 very hard, deep resistances. The resistance is Saturn, and the Pluto is the absolute necessity to break through and transform those resistances. It's a very powerful conjunction. It's not an easy conjunction, and it does really indicate the person has to work through some pretty deep, serious shit, to put it quite bluntly. I think that's what really probably kind of helped her and really caused her a lot of struggle at the same time. Helped her in the sense where she really pushed through and pushed through and pushed through. Now, the other thing that I would like you to pay attention to, because the way this chart is structured, let me see if I can just fix it. There we go. Okay, now everything looks as it actually is. So if you look at the top part of the chart, the midheaven, the 10th house, which is her life direction, career, her public self, her public life, how others saw her. Note what she has up there. That's, for those of you that don't know that symbol, that's Ceres, the goddess Ceres. Now, the goddess Ceres is a very complex asteroid, and probably one of the most powerful asteroids in the astrological birth chart, in my opinion, just for the sheer fact of when Ceres is involved in something, whether it's through transits or when she's prominently placed in the birth chart, her story is very, very prominent in the person's life. Now, Ceres was the mother of Persephone. Persephone was abducted by Pluto, and as a result, Ceres practically starved herself to death, and she, through her grief and her mourning of her daughter's abduction, she refused to allow crops on the earth to grow. So she held back food, right, to put it quite simply. And so when Ceres is prominent in the chart, there's a number of different levels, but in the way it's played out for Amy Winehouse is that Ceres on the midheaven has got to do with her very severe clinical condition of bulimia. So she had a very severe eating disorder, and it was made public. The public component is the fact that Ceres is conjunct her 10th house up here on the midheaven. Anything on the midheaven is seen publicly by the world out there in relation to the individual. Because she was in the public eye anyway, naturally, everybody pretty much knew that she was ill. She had bulimia. it started when she was quite young. And Ceres is always connected to any kind of food disorder. So people who have a prominent Ceres, it wouldn't be unlikely for them to have experienced some kind of food disorder in their life. Now, for Amy, it was so severe that it pretty much killed her, along with the substance abuse, because she wasn't eating, and she was drinking and taking some other substances as well. So she started with the bulimia quite young, where she would stuff her face. And if you go to the documentary, you will notice that when she was younger, she was quite plump, not overweight, but she was as a typical young girl, I guess you could say. She had the baby fat, so to speak, which is very natural for young teenagers in most cases. But there was this dramatic change. It's like one day she was, sort of voluptuous, if you like, and then before you knew it, she was just this tiny, skinny little. She was tiny. She looked like she must have weighed only about 40 kilos. She wasn't a very tall person, I don't think. So 40 kilos is not a lot, whether you're tall or whether you're short, really. So she was very, very ill with bulimia. That became public. That's Ceres on the midheaven. The Moon Neptune is the disconnect with her mother as well, overly sensitive herself. Now, Neptune is also that energy that makes someone quite impressionable, very sensitive to vibrations and energy and people around them. So if some Neptune or Moon Neptune people, for example, if they hang out with really negative people, just to use a simple example, what's going to happen generally, typically, to the Sun Neptune or Moon Neptune person is they will absorb that negativity so much so that it becomes them, and they essentially just start feeling bad about themselves. So she had, Moon Neptune, Sun Neptune, so you can imagine what she was picking up from all around her. And her boyfriend, who she was really, really, really in love with him. And he ended up in prison, and there was quite a few things that happened there. Very sad story, even with her and her boyfriend as well. Just want to see if I've left anything out. So that's basically it. I've made some pretty strong statements here in relation to what I can identify and correlate with her life story and the planetary energies in her birth chart. And as you can see, it's quite literal. Neptune is always connected to drugs and alcohol as well. Anyway, I've explained what I've explained, so it's all there. You can have a re-listen if you like. But there's so many things that are so literal in her chart. The Venus-Mars in Leo, that creative force that she had. She was such a talented person. Honestly, she was, whether you like her or whether you don't, is irrelevant. This is not about liking her or not liking her. This is really about acknowledging just how much of an amazing musician she was. There's a scene, which you can see this on YouTube anyway. She does a song with Tony Bennett, who's an old school jazz musician, who she basically revered. She adored him, and she got to meet him and do a duet with him. And you can see her with Tony Bennett, where he was so sweet to her. He was. This was towards the end of her life, and I think he just could see that she was quite vulnerable and quite fragile, and she was incredibly nervous in his presence. And he was really kind to her. He was very empathetic, very sensitive. You can see that in the interaction between them. And she was just trying so hard to get the song perfect with him. And it didn't matter how hard she tried. She just wasn't satisfied with what she did, because she wanted so badly to impress him. And, you know, see, Tony Bennett would have been like a father figure to her as well, you know, so much older than her. And Tony Bennett really gave her, just in those few moments, gave her so much care and so much attention in a way that she really needed, that she never really got from her father. Just one other thing I want to mention about her father. There was a time when she'd been in hospital because she was so sick from her bulimia and from her drug and alcohol usage. And she was, you know, she could barely walk, she could barely stand, and she was had committed to do a concert somewhere, and she didn't want to do it. She just wasn't in the right space, you know, physically, mentally, emotionally. She was just so messed up, and her father just literally pushed her. He pushed her so hard that he literally put her on this private jet that they went on, almost carried her in there, you know, just to. She was just lost, completely lost. And he just puts her in this aircraft, and they go to this destination, and she was stuffed. She basically got on the stage, and she didn't know where she was. She literally had no idea where she was. She had no idea what she was doing on stage, and who these people were that were looking at her. The band were at a loss because they didn't know what the hell was going on. She sat down on one of the speakers on the stage, and she's just looking around, really just so confused and disorientated. Looks at the crowd. Some of them started booing at her. It was just the most heartbreaking scene to see. And this is just a result of her father just constantly pushing her to do what he wanted her to do. You know, I mean, how screwed up is that? Sorry, that's my opinion, but I think that's pretty screwed up. So yeah, overall, a soul who was suffering tremendously on a very deep level, and she couldn't break out of it. She couldn't survive it in the end. So she died. So that's the story of Amy Winehouse, and that was her chart. It is a sad story, but it is also a very powerful way to learn astrology, because the correlations that I've made, you can see, are pretty much literal from her life story. So that's that, guys. Hopefully you found that interesting, and hopefully it's taught you something, or it's given you something to reflect on or consider. And I'll be back soon with something else. Not sure, we'll see. I've got millions of ideas in my head. I've actually made I've made hundreds of videos in my head. I just need to now sit down and do them. I've just got so much material in my mind, which is wonderful. And I really, would love sharing this with you guys as well. So this video has been made just a couple of days before the total lunar eclipse on January 20 to 21, 2019. So again, happy lunar eclipse. Take care of yourselves, and I hope that the new year is going well for all of you. Feel free to contact me for a reading. Just email me directly. I'll leave my details below in the description box, as I always do. And just feel free to comment on this video and ask any questions as well. Thanks so much for all your love and blessings, and sending you guys love and blessings right back. See you soon. Bye.